introduction, I think it's very important for us to understand what we are talking about. What is culture? What is culture? And what is Japanese culture? I just picked up Japanese culture because we are in Japan, but the same idea might apply to other cultures to understand the specifics of culture and what is cultural intelligence. Okay, so these are the three key main points that I like to touch in my introduction. So I have a question for you. Are you a good cross-cultural leader? Well, it's different from being a simple good leader. I'm saying a good cross-cultural leader. So what does it mean? Yeah. So how do you describe your leadership style in a cross-cultural setting? That's more elaborate way of asking your leadership in cross-cultural situation. Is it different from the one you exercise in your home culture? That's my definition for cross-cultural leadership. So it's different from the one that you naturally exercise in your home culture. Then there's something different that you may be doing in a cross-cultural setting. That's assumption I have. So the culture is something that kind of causes differences or changes in our behaviors. So what is culture? So here's one way to explain. Can you identify what kind of influence you feel in yourself from any culture? So our thinking, mental programming, according to Hofstede, he's a giant of comparative cultural studies. He said our minds are actually made of these three layers. We have this human nature thinking, yeah, and culture thinking, and personality. So can you tell an example of human nature thinking? For example, as a human being, we think we shouldn't kill each other. Well, nowadays we don't know this is really a universal value now, but natural response is that we don't want to kill each other. Or when you see, say, a child crying, you feel like attending to the child. That's a natural response. That's, again, people might say this is not always the same in different parts of the world. But let's say this is the human nature that we have. So it is said to be universal, that we share a common thing. And it's inherited, meaning it's natural to us. We don't need to even think about this. So that's assumption for human nature. So let's say, skip the culture, let's go to personality. So personality, you may be a cheerful person, very thoughtful person, quiet person, very loud person. We have a lot of different personalities, right? So when we say personality, it's inherited and learned and it's specific to individual. There's a lot of different opinions about personality, but much of that is said to be inherited, meaning we are born with it. We can't change it. I think probably at your workplaces you do some personality assessment, strengths finders. We do all those psychological assessment, and that was supposed to measure our natural tendency. But there's something learned in our life experience or family, the situation of community, but much of that is really inherited. So we are born with a certain personality. We can't change it. So what is culture that is in between human nature and personality that we are born with? Culture is actually specific to certain group or category. And that can be, or that should be learned. We are not born with it. Yeah. So I happened to be born in Japan, yeah, in a particular family, and I grew up with the family, grew up in the town. So I belong to a group, maybe from the same town or same region, you can create different kind of group to discuss. But then because of the group that I belong to, I learn certain way of doing things, certain way of thinking. Yeah? So, Japanese culture is the culture that is learned by people who belong to the group called Japan. Yeah? So I see many foreign faces, but now that you're in Japan, maybe you spent a lot of time in Japan, you're part of the group. You're learning the culture. So you understand Japanese culture. So culture is something that we can learn. We are not born with it. Okay. So cultural thinking is that, so according to the Hofstede, there's a certain thing that we're born with, but this culture thing, which has a great impact on the way we think, the way we do things, and that's really determine how we interact. So this is the definition of a culture. So when we talk about culture, especially in business, we can sometimes get confused because there's also layers in the concept of culture. We may be talking about national culture, like Japanese culture, or sometimes we can talking about organizational culture. When we say Japanese company, is the same with Japanese culture or Japanese company's culture, organizational culture. Or even we can think about professional or functional culture. I often hear a conflict between sales department and R&D department. Like, they don't understand customers, or they don't understand science. So there's different things. Cultures everywhere because it belongs to certain groups. Whenever we have groups, we have different cultures. Okay, but in this today's seminar topic, I'd like to focus on national culture. Now, so there's an interesting saying by this Hofstede. Hofstede. He says culture only exists by comparison. It's hard to understand Japanese culture without comparing to other cultures such as Chinese culture, US culture. Then we suddenly start to understand how different we are. So that's what he said, culture only exists by comparison. And another expert in the field says, culture is the way in which people solve problems. I love this saying. I work at business school, and business people always talk about problem solving. But when you have a global team solving problems, we have different way of processing problems, right? So apparently, culture is a vehicle of bringing different kinds of solutions, different approaches to the problem. So I really like this saying, culture is the way in which people solve problems. So culture can be a great asset for us to devise different ideas and different thinking, but also it's really an easy way to get confused and even disagree or feeling hurt. So many things around culture. And so now talk about Japan. So we have a lot of foreign places here. Do you find Japan is an easy place to live? Yes? Mixed reaction. But I have some data to show you. So this is ranking, okay? A ranking. And Japan made it to 26. It's quite low, among 30 of the country. What kind of ranking is this? So Cayman Islands come to the top, followed by Thailand, Spain, Singapore, Malaysia, the USA 20, Australia 10, China 22, and Japan 26, India 2. What kind of ranking is this? Any guess? Yeah, answer is, it is called, I have this answer. This is the Expert Explorer Survey by HSBC Global Banking. So they did a survey among the experts to ask which country is the easiest to settle. So Cayman Islands are top. And then this ranking is made of 3 components. First, overall ease of setting up. Yeah. And second, overall quality of life. And overall integration. So I'm really proud to say Japan has a great quality of life. Do you agree? Quite safe, clean, not as expensive as a city like Hong Kong or London, let's say. So I think it's a quite nice city to live in. But still we only made it to 26, simply because of this integration, issue of integration, meaning expats don't feel being included in a local community. Do you agree? Wow, strong notes, okay. And I found it quite sad because I thought it's a great place to live and very cosmopolitan, I thought, but then people don't feel really quite included. And that's kind of tarnished their experience of living in Tokyo or anywhere else in Japan. So that's the ranking. So question is, Japan, what's Japanese culture? That's it. Exclude foreigners. Sorry, it's a quite direct way to pose a question, but is it? Do you feel excluded? And that's a really important question because we discuss a lot of topics around diversity and inclusion, and exclusion is the opposite of inclusion. If this our culture, Japanese culture, is acting to exclude people, that's quite sad. And then we have, the Japanese workplaces have this reputation for high context communication, conflict avoidance, low risk tolerance. And those seem to be the top 3 that annoy a lot of non-Japanese working Japanese corporation. Is that true? I hear, Tanaka-san doesn't really say it. I need to assume it. Or, in a meeting, nobody really disagrees, and I don't understand why we are here for. Or management taking so much time making decisions, but never make decisions, not taking any risks. So now you understand what I'm trying to say. So those are the typical comments we receive as a Japanese company, and you have burning question. Conflict avoidance is, you understand conflicts, right? Yeah, we are Japanese people are set to try to avoid conflicts, disagreement, or even, disputes. Yeah, so that's the tendency. So to avoid that, we don't even, sometimes it doesn't appear that we are discussing something in a meeting, right? We're just listening to each other. Afraid of sharing different opinions. So that's conflict avoidance. Okay? And low risk tolerance, again, not making any risky decision or not making any decision at all. So those are the comments that we receive. So where is it coming from? How we mean the Japanese people end up being like this? Do you have any example? And there's thank you. Yeah, we talked about the Confucius ideal and other things. Confucius is a big influence to traditional Japanese culture, right? Other things maybe? Okay. Geographical situations, and is that same for all islands? That's my question though. yeah. So island situation, when I get to questions, tropical islands, they are quite open. Yeah, geographical, religious tradition, and collectivism. Where is it coming from again? Yeah. So ideals of Japanese. So first of all, since I picked up high context communication, I like to touch on communication issue. The ideal of the Japanese communication is actually this. What is this? You've seen them, right? Every temple, you see them. No shrine, this is temple, this is Buddhism. Okay? What's the difference between these two guys? Mouth is closed, mouth is open. Okay? This is same idea. You see them at every temple, and this is lion, dog, komainu. It's imaginary animals. They don't exist. This is also again mouth closed and open, and this is also the same. Giraffe, mouth closed, mouth open. This is called the concept of aun. Aun. Okay, let me just explain. This is coming from Hindu. Aun. So Buddhism term. A means the first sound that signifies the beginning of the word. Cosmos, beginning. So what does un mean? It's the last sound that signifies the end of the word. So beginning and end. Aun means when we use aun, a and un together, that means it completes the word simultaneously, beginning and end. It's just complete. One sound, aun, yeah, and synchronize everything. So if I say a, you say un, then everything's over. We understand each other. But seriously, this is a conversation we are here in management meeting in Japanese company. One person said, ねえ、そうだよね。そうですね。Done. Right? But that's what it is. Like we understand. Well, we think we understand, right? So that's said to be ideal. We shouldn't say everything. Yeah, having this beautiful word connected, understood at once. That's the beauty of our concept. Another thing, like you said, this guy, Confucius, he wrote this beautiful book ages ago, and he has this famous saying that impacted Japanese culture. Half a word is enough for wise men. Don't say everything. That's so when I say just one, other person understands 10. Beautiful, right? So Japanese manager use this word to evaluate subordinates. This guy, Sato-kun, when I say one, he understands 10. Perfect. Wonderful, he needs to be promoted. Well, serious. So this is again really ideal communication for Japanese people. I don't need to explain everything. We share context. Yeah. So this is Confucius. So we have this Buddhism tradition and Confucius tradition to explain why this is better. And context is more important than words. The words doesn't say much. Just 10% of everything I'm going to say. You need to understand context. So we see a lot of values in context. Okay? If you say everything, you can be seen as, say, uneducated. No understanding social code, or you just don't share the same wealth of knowledge. Well, it's a little bit of an elite mindset in this. But that's where our tendency to high context communication is coming from. So I just wanted to bring up this to explain, again, one more thing. Because of the high context, this is the form of arts. This is formal communication. You know this art of no, theoretical arts. You don't hardly see any movements. And slight tilt of mask, explain different emotions. Which one is the smiling one? Which one is the sad one? I don't know. I need to read through the books and But in this traditional art, certain tilts really explain subtle differences between. So that's again, we think it's the ideal beauty of communication. Subtleness. Okay. So given this traditional thing, I wanted to pick up this example just to explain the components of cultural intelligence. That was just one example. Cultural intelligence is made of three things. One, knowledge. Like the topic we just discussed, so high context, where is it coming from? Buddhism tradition, Confucius tradition, and arts, and everything. So that's knowledge we need to know, that's all. Whether you know or don't know. The second, awareness. So ability to notice, or willingness to notice the differences. And so pose question, what is this? Be open about, asking those questions. What is going on and where is it coming from? Why is this person acting this way? So without judgment, notice, awareness, mindfulness. And third, is skill. Skill is a kind of broad word, but then in this context, I'm using it just to say the ability to act on the knowledge and awareness. Now I know where this Japanese culture is coming from. Then now I understand how Suzanne is acting out on this culture. Then how should I respond? What is the appropriate way to respond? So that's the skill. Not just understanding, be able to act is the skill in this context. So these three are the main components of cultural intelligence. Okay. So knowledge is really, I don't even think I understand the entire Japanese culture, the details of Japanese culture. So knowledge is the vast area to tap in. And if you explore culture in every part of the world, I think we need to reincarnate at least 1,000 times. So knowledge is another thing, but awareness and skill is something we can really train ourselves and really develop such things, awareness and skill. So I like to focus our discussion on this topic, this area tonight. And so now I'm almost ready to invite my dialogue partner, Suzanne. And here's a list of key thoughts we'd like to touch on today. Number one, for the awareness, stereotypes. Stereotypes. We're going to talk about that concept today, right? And relate to that, unconscious biases that we have within the cultures. And that's the awareness part. And skill part, we are really touching on very practical issues such as language, uncomfortable conversation in workplace. So let's say limit our scope to the workplaces, and also decision making. So we like to touch on these topics in cross-cultural settings. Okay. So I'm a Japanese person, but I spent about 9 years outside of Japan working. So I like to bring in my own experiences, and also Suzanne being here for more than 20 years, so she has her own experiences. And we have a great collection of people who have vast different experiences. So I'd like to bring in your perspectives into the conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Ms. Price for a dialogue session. Please welcome Suzanne.
Maybe before we set that up, and I'll just give a little bit of context about myself. So yes, I'm based here in Tokyo. Megumi says I've been here 20 years, but I actually lived in New York for 8 years in the middle of that. I'm from Wales in the UK, so I'm British, and I'm Welsh, and I'm from the UK, which maybe leaves me culturally confused. And I've lived and worked in Australia, as well as Japan, as well as the United States. And the work I do, I coach global leaders and then provide strategy consulting as well as workshops for organizations around inclusion and diversity. So a lot of that work is with multinationals all over the world, hoping to increase how often I work in the Cayman Islands, from what I've just heard, Spain, Thailand as well, I and also working with some of the Japanese multinationals. So what I'd like to do first is I'm going to show you a little video. We're just going to do a quick little activity, and then from there we'll sit down together and we'll have more of a dialogue around some of these key themes that Megumi's mentioned. So what I'd like to do first then is I'm going to show you a very short video, and you have a task. What I'd like you to do is while you're watching this video, I would like you to count how many times the people wearing a white t-shirt pass a ball. Okay? So that's your task. Count how many times the people wearing a white t-shirt pass a ball. Yep. So let me ask you, how many times? 15? What else do we have? 13? Okay. And let me ask you another question. Did anybody notice anything strange?
I think a couple of times they passed it to the other team. I'm not so sure, but I think.
Yeah, not quite sure what the rules of that game was, right? Okay. Anything else?
Someone was dancing around.
Someone was dancing around. Tell me more.
Well, that or something, or the air or something like this.
Okay, does anybody have any idea what this gentleman is talking about? He saw some kind of black bear or something dancing about. Did anybody else see anything like that? Okay, quite a few of you, and a lot of you did not. So the answer is they passed the ball 13 times. And some of your fellow students, colleagues, peers in the room have spotted something that quite a lot of you did not, that there was in fact a moonwalking bear, and a lot of you did not notice. So we'll continue the video and I'll show you where that's coming in. So it's the exact same video now. So you can see the bear coming from the right side. Okay, so did everybody get it this time? So this video is testing your awareness, and the idea of this video is to look at the notion of selective attention. Okay, so because I told you to watch the people with the white t-shirts and count the ball, you didn't have anything on your radar other than a few people that perhaps there's something else happening in this video. So you would not have noticed the moonwalking bear. Of course, once I pointed out, now you can see it, right? So I'm now going to show you another quick video, and your task here is going to be exactly the same. So once again, it's count how many times the people wearing white t-shirts pass the ball. Okay, we can pause there. Okay, how many times? Okay, did you notice anything strange?
What are their team members?
Okay, quite a few of you saying a gorilla, right? So I'm not surprised when you've already seen the moonwalking bear, so you're looking for something like a gorilla or some other animal doing something strange, right? Did you notice anything else?
Were there 3 and 3 members before?
Sorry?
I thought there were 3 and 3 players, now it's
Yes, there were 3 and 3, so we seem to have lost one of the players with a black t-shirt. Honestly, how many of you noticed that? A few of you, not all. Okay. Did you notice anything else? Okay, so the curtains changed color. Again, honestly, how many of you noticed that? Just a few of you, right? So the thing is, even though I've explained to you the concept of selective attention, still, most of you were only able to count the ball and notice, is there any animal doing anything bizarre? A lot of you still didn't notice, oh, we've lost a player, or the curtains have changed colors, right? Because that wasn't on your radar yet. So if we play the rest of the video, you can see it rewind and you can see what happens. Of course, in high speed, you can see the change in the color easily. Okay. So it's changed color and we've lost the player. So again, this is reinforcing that one of the biases that we have is a kind of selective attention. If people put certain things on our radar, we notice those things. And then if there are things that haven't been put on our radar, we don't notice them. And so where this plays in then into things related to culture, Megumi and I will talk about this as more related to various topics, but it means that if I had an experience with a certain culture, that experience is now on my radar. And then I'm looking for more information to reinforce that. So one of the organizations I was consulting for, they were looking at resumes of people that they were considering as young new hires. And then one person said, oh, this one's from Vietnam. Remember the last one from Vietnam? He was fantastic. And what happens with that is it creates a confirmation bias. That now everybody starts to look for information in that one Vietnamese candidate that proves he's just as fantastic as the last one. So often this kind of thing happens in organizations. If we're told someone's a high potential, we look for information to prove that. If we're told that they're lousy, we look for information to prove that as well. And so often then we end up with things like a halo or a horns bias. So we'll discuss a little bit more how does this relate to culture.
Okay, great. Thank you, Suzanne. Let's take a seat. So, for awareness, we picked up the concept of stereotypes and unconscious bias. So, so is it anybody is free from stereotypes?
Is anybody free from stereotypes? No. Actually, yes, any kind. Stereotypes is a form of unconscious bias. So we all have unconscious bias, right? This is a natural mechanism that we need for our survival. So when it comes to stereotypes as well, yes, we're all going to be exposed to information about certain groups. So if any of us do some kind of awareness test or some kind of an association test around certain groups, say women, Japanese, people with particular colored skin, with a disability even, then probably we will all answer in a way that shows some conscious but also some unconscious biases and stereotypes that we have about that group. And the thing is with stereotypes is, to some degree they can, like as a generalization, they can be useful, right? It may be useful for me to know, typically Japanese behave in A, B, C, D way. And then I can think about how I adapt my behavior accordingly, and I think that's part of the cultural intelligence, right? But if I only see what's been put on my radar and I stereotype them as definitely being like this, I won't notice any individuality or when anything is different from what my assumption is.
Yeah. So in our classes, we often receive questions about, so when I say, well, Japanese people are typically like this, they go, oh, that's stereotypes. You put it, keep people into boxes. And yes, I am, but it has definitely benefit, and it really talks about general tendencies. But we also, at the same time, we should be very aware and realistic.
Yes, I think one of the things is that if we are conscious of the stereotypes we have, then we have a choice to separate that bias, that belief, from our behavior, or to question that. So, for example, you know, when I lived in New York, people told me New Yorkers are rude. So I would notice in the supermarkets if someone was being rude. I might not notice when someone was being polite or helpful. Likewise in Japan, we are told all Japanese are so polite and courteous. But there were some rude people here, right? I mean, pushed by an Italian on the train that really wanted the seat I was going for. And so if we recognize, well, that's maybe a bias, it's a stereotype that's getting fixed, then we can recognize, okay, I'm maybe treating all New Yorkers now as if they're rude, and I'm kind of revved up, ready to have a fight with all of them, and perhaps that's not appropriate, right? It's not serving me, not serving them. So the thing is, with stereotypes, if we recognize we have them, Japanese are like this, they don't make decisions, or, they're polite, they're too slow. Then if we recognize we have that bias and then put it aside, then we're able to see individuals who they actually are. And so that's the thing, is we cannot suppress. If we try to suppress, it actually starts oozing out in bad taste jokes and so on. So what we actually have to do is recognize we have it and put it aside, and then see individuals for who they are.
Yeah, so I introduced this triangle post-it to explain the mental program. So that we have human nature and culture and personality. And when I encounter some interesting interaction with other people from different culture, I try to sort of separate the reason why this person's behavior is like this. Is that it's a culture or personality or mix? And I can kind of distance myself to just be plain understand. That's all.
Yeah, and it can be a combination of all of it, right? Because I think, you know, your personality is in a dance with what you've learned in terms of culture, and then also social expectations around you. So we may say, for example, Swiss people are always on time. But some Swiss individuals may be very flexible with their time and often late as an individual. The thing is society won't appreciate it, and they may get into trouble for it. Now, the exact same personality, perhaps in, say, a culture in Latin America, it may be more acceptable for them to have a more flexible view of time, and they won't be judged around it. So often I think, you know, sometimes our personality and our culture, they're in a dance, and there's a little bit of like, do we conform with our own culture or not?
And it's always relative, right? How you are sort of perceived, evaluating different cultures is very interesting. Like when I was working in Japan in Japanese, I was told that I'm just too rude. Like I say whatever I would say. Then my boss was, you're just so rude. But when I moved to New York, I was told that you're not really contributing at all because you're not sharing opinions. I was like, what? So it's quite relative. And that's something that we need to know.
And some of it's based on the context, right? Because I remember when I was living in Japan before, then I would have been considered quite extrovert and quite outspoken. Then when I lived in New York, I was considered to be somewhat introverted because I was being drowned out by people, or maybe my British way of talking didn't allow me to hear as big a voice as I might have done in Japan.
Exactly. Yeah, so we share some example of the awareness. And so the video on the selective attention, and then topic of stereotyping and unconscious bias. And I'd like to move on to skill. So if you have any question or story to share about awareness, please just write it down. We have half an hour to share. And skill part, first I'd like to touch on language. Yeah, so as you may know, many Japanese people, including Asian people, are very conscious of not being able to speak very good English, and they think that maybe is the same they
who's, especially for me as a British person, at least I'm from Wales, so we speak Welsh too, but, as a British person, and I think for a lot of people coming from countries where English is our native language, it feels very arrogant to say, at the end of the day, the global language these days is English. And so if people want to get on doing business globally, then we need to have a common language. So there is some truth that, yes, you need to be able to speak English well in order to do global business. But having, and of course to work in multicultural teams. But having said that, I think it really depends, what do we mean by speaking English well? And I think often what happens in Japan is people get so fixated on perfectionism and speaking grammatically correctly. I don't even know if that was grammatically correct. And it doesn't matter, right? I did it in front of a room full of people and I'm British, and it doesn't matter. And I think that's one of the things, is often Japanese are so concerned about getting it right. And they're afraid of being shamed, of being embarrassed. And so they're so focused on the technicality of the language instead of simply using it as a communication tool. So one of the things that I've seen is some of the large global organizations I work with, they have people from places like Cambodia, Vietnam, Brazil, from everywhere, and people speaking with all different degrees of English. And in companies that do well with that, people wait long enough for the non-native speakers to express what they need to. They're used to hearing different inventive ways of explaining something, and there's no shame in the culture for that. And people, I think, have the guts to just go for it. But I often find it interesting, I go to some developing world countries, and even people without education can speak enough language to sell me something, or to take me somewhere I don't want to go and charge me for it. Right? and it's interesting, right? It's interesting, right, from a survival point of view. And so how on earth is it that Japanese have so much education and still they struggle with speaking English? And I think at the end of the day, they do know enough. They just don't allow themselves to just blurt out words, string words together, and trust that people will understand what they're saying. And I think, you can be fluent without actually being grammatically correct. And perhaps that should be what people are going for, rather than trying to sound correct.
Yeah. What I see as more problematic is that a lot of people from high complex culture doesn't say all the details, not clear about yes or no, and that really creates confusion. Not just between high context and low context cultures, but between high context cultures like Japan and China, we are having a lot of trouble because we don't say it to the end. We assume each other from different contexts. Then we end up being, on a totally different page. Right. So rather than global communication, I think it's better to just focus on, say, to business term.
Yeah, I mean, there's something very beautiful about high context communication. And at the same time, yes, sometimes in some business settings, or when you've got people from all different cultures, it's easier to connect if you're speaking in a low context way. And it pains me to some degree to say this because I love speaking in a high context way in Japan, and I'm British. When I lived in New York, it's far more low context there, and I prefer to have my more flowery vocabulary and suggestive ways of saying things from my British culture, but quite often people had no clue what I was talking about. And so one thing I really noticed when I lived in New York is there's people from so many different countries, and the way they speak is very simplistic. And from a snobby British point of view, I felt like they've eliminated half of the tenses. However, that works. Right? People would say things in a very direct way, and it makes sense. There were a lot of people speaking English as a second or third language. They said everything in such a simplistic, direct way. There was no mistaking, is this yes or is this no? And yes, I think often it can, and it doesn't have to be that you're speaking in a context all the time. You're speaking in that way as a means to an end. At the end of the day, we want to be understood. So adapt to a style where everybody can understand.
So as a foreigner, I lived in New York for about 5 years. But I felt so included because I understood them. They understood me. Whereas I lived in London for 3 years, I had a hard time, making friends, basically. So I think this directness in New York culture is really helped global community to form.
Yeah, and it's an interesting comment you make because you're in London, you're from a culture that's even higher context. I mean, Britain is actually quite low-ish, just not as low as the United States. But still, quite a few of the things British people said would have gone over your head. It would have been sarcastic, ironic, lots of jokes where you have to read between the lines.
Yes, so that was tough. Yeah, then the language issue becomes more critical when we have uncomfortable conversation. So again, thinking about the business situation, we have, if you're a manager, there's a moment you have to tell your team member something that needs to be really corrected. Feedback. And it's often happening both in between Japanese people that we have so high context about the problems. We need to have another different session to really, confront what we're talking about. So this is culture, right? That we have trouble really saying bad things to people. But professionally, I personally think it's not really lazy for manager not to have taken responsibility to say it. What do you think?
I think what often happens is that corrective feedback is given in a suggestive way, and again you have to read between the lines. I mean, even when we go to a shop and we ask if they have something, they won't tell us a blank no. It's kind of suggested in a gentle way, right? And so it seems that in work context as well, there's a few things going on. One might be cultural, that there's a fear of losing face, that if I tell you something directly that that's not going well and you need to work on it, there's maybe a fear that now you're going to lose face. And of course, this is a culture where people are often caring about preserving face, right? So that could be part of it. But then I see a contradiction to that, because often when I work with some Japanese companies, they actually give sometimes very, very blunt corrective feedback to the point of some people would consider it almost power harassment these days. And so what I see happening there is they will say very clearly, don't do that, do it like this. But then afterwards, they go for drinks, they have their communication, and then during that time, they start talking about, when I was your age, I used to make those mistakes, and here's how I learned how to do it. So they learned how to smooth over afterwards. But I think what's happened is these days, less people are going for communication after work. Maybe sometimes foreigners are not going or don't quite fit into that context. We're noticing more and more women or parents are not going because of perhaps other obligations or not comfortable in the environment. So now managers don't have that opportunity to say, yeah, I know I was mean earlier, but I did it for your own good, and now I'm smoothing over it and we're cool with each other. They haven't got the opportunity to do that anymore, and they haven't figured out a better skilled way and having better interpersonal skills to be able to sit down and say, well, Megumi, we agreed you should be doing X. You're hitting here but not there. What's going on? And it seems they don't even have the skills to dialogue or to coach or counsel through that.
Yeah, so I think the global is really becoming a crucial skill to be able to address uncomfortable situation. But then, so Japanese or maybe other cultures all have this conflict avoidance. But then, in this case, because I've seen some cases where managers are not being able to articulate the problems of the subordinate. So she repeated the same mistakes. At the end, these subordinates get the promotion. And that's a real bad turn.
Because they were meant to read between the lines and understand what they were being told and fix it.
Yeah.
Or they were supposed to go to their senpai and get help to figure out what's going on right and to fix it. one interesting conversation I had with a Japanese organization we were facilitating some training for, we were asking them, when foreigners come to work for their company in Japan, whose responsibility is it to guide the foreigners in terms of culturally appropriate behavior? And interestingly, not one of the Japanese thought it was their responsibility to guide the foreigners. They're all horrified when foreigners make cultural mistakes. But they thought that the foreigners should study in a book, online, learn somehow from somewhere. And I kept pushing and pushing, because I really couldn't believe, you don't want to teach your foreign colleagues how to be successful around here. And it started becoming clearer and clearer. We're embarrassed to say anything to them. We don't know how to say it. And I think, again, it gets back to that concern of causing others to lose space.
Yeah, and again, so that also affects the decision making, and it's directly related to, well, conflict avoidance as well as low risk tolerance. So I don't know how you feel about how Japanese companies make a decision. Usually it takes long. As a Japanese person, I'm prepared to take long to get a decision, and how I plan things out. And so, famous thing in this making decision is nemawashi, and that's too famous, right? So we do a lot of informal investigation and confirming and sharing opinions before we go to meetings and make decisions. But I start to see the benefit of nemawashi more and more as our business, the global business, becoming more complex, right? So the stakeholders, we have various different kinds of stakeholders, different opinions, and without knowing subtle differences in context, we can really make a simple blunt mistake in direction that we got backfired by different parties. So actually having this skill in a global business actually helps. But it really costs you time.
Yeah, I think, decision making, it depends on the setting as well, right? I mean, in some emergency situation, you want a leader that says, we go this way, right? We need something like quick decision making. There may be something else where, of course, there's lots of things to research and consider, and it's maybe a high risk decision, and then we're going to research a lot more before we do that. But the thing is, it seems globally there's no kind of like common understanding of how quick is quick and how long can slow thinking, slow decision making be. And again, I think some of it comes back to shame, because it's again about, like, if we've researched everything, considered everything from every possible angle, we've looked at what our competitors have been doing, if we've done all of that, we can finally say, aha, okay, we're ready to make a decision. We've really turned over every stone, and we're comfortable to say this is our decision, and we've got consensus from everybody else. I'm not feeling all alone with this decision. The tricky thing is, with such an extended decision-making process, is, say you're making a decision about a new product you want to launch to market. You've lost the market. Everybody else has launched their product before yours has reached the market, right? Or various options you're trying to make a decision about. That option's gone.
So agility, right?
Yes.
This is one of the competitive things that companies have in this ever-changing world. So
I think with the agility as well, there's also the agility to reverse the decision. Let's, if I look at some cultures that make decisions quickly, they're a bit more risk-taking, and if that decision proves to not be the best decision, then they will reverse it. They'll say, you know what, we thought this, but now we understood ABC, now we've changed our minds, we're going to do X instead. Whereas I think for Japanese, to say,
it's shameful.
yes, exactly, and then nobody's going to try their decision again. Yeah. So there's no kind of psychological safety for them to backtrack in that way and to reverse the decision. So it can feel, very high pressure, like high odds.
Yeah. So taking an example, my organization, GLOBIS University, we have this. So if you let things to slide naturally, it takes days to make a decision. So we have this rule in our communication. When we propose something on an email, we need to respond in 24 hours. If you don't, it goes. If you like to object, you need to raise your voice in 24 hours. So especially announcement, whether it's night or morning, you just have to say it. And if you don't say it, it just goes through. And we're so good at following rules, right? Once the rule is implemented, we don't disagree. We say, okay, that's the rule, then we'll just, respond. And that really helps. And also in the meeting, we are trying to create the atmosphere where people are easy to say, I was wrong. Then we say, okay, yeah, that happens. Then what should we do next? So try to create a culture of accepting faults, forgiving, let it go, move on. Really helps. But if you create a rule or sort of standard behavior, I think Japanese people are very good at following. That's one of the things.
Yes, when there's some kind of pattern or form or
Yeah.
rule of here's how we do things around here, they're pretty good at fitting with that rule.
Yeah.
However, they have a stereotype that foreigners break all the rules.
Okay. That's true.
We do our best.